Right, good. A little bit of an explanation firstly then. This all stems back to, according to my notes here, 13th of December, when we were all on a call, a meeting with the Middlesex Club. And Derek Polecut, who's on here tonight somewhere, I've seen him arrive, showed a vase which he said had inspired him to try and make a wooden version. And he had a go, but it was unsuccessful. So he'd like to know how to do it. So he threw down a challenge, basically, for anybody to have a go. Now, I know for a fact a few other Middlesex members, because I've seen them, have actually made something like it. So I think Giancarlo Giaffardi had done certainly one or two, and I think there was another one. I didn't make a note of who it was. So during the meeting that we had, I made this little drawing, which you might be able to see. It's a bit pathetic, but it was a thumbnail sketch, which I just about got down, just to give me an idea of what Derek was talking about. And during my presentation, I forgot to take a photograph of one particular part, and there's I think I mentioned the fact that I should have taken a photograph. You won't be able to see this very well, where I used a bit of bent wire, but that is the bit of bent wire. So when I get to that bit, you'll have to imagine it, I'm afraid. So let's commence. Derek will have to tell me whether I've done any good when we get to the end. So, as I say here, it followed a meeting on the 13th of December. I did a quick sketch, and the original object was clearly pottery, I would say, and therefore making a flat pottery vase is probably quite easy. But can you make one out of wood was the question, and apparently an attempt had failed. The picture that you can see is what I ended up with, but we're now going to go through how to get there. So, okay. I started off with a flat piece of wood, which was those dimensions, 6.5 by 5.5 by 2.5 deep. And I basically marked on it the shape of the vase. I left the bottom, and the bottom of the vase here, and the top where the original bits of the wood was just flat. I think I sawed it off at the top there. I used compasses in the centre here, and it didn't really matter because I was going to use that for mounting it anyway later on, so it didn't matter. There was a great big hole through the middle of it. I've also drawn on here, just to give me an idea of where I was going, the shape of the inside of the neck event that was going to be there eventually. The thing I had to worry about was not getting too close to this flat edge, so when we come to the inside, I think this diameter here takes me just short of it, which is what the aim was anyway. So I basically just cut it out on the bandsaw, drew the various things, and then we carried on. Okay, I've mounted the thing using a screw chuck. You can just see I used a plate here. I don't think I needed to really, because the back of it was quite flat anyway. Drilled a hole where the caliper point was, mounted it on a screw chuck, and because it was fairly unbalanced, I have to say, I just used the slower speed on my lathe, which is just a belt-driven lathe, so I can't whiz the speed up and down like some of you folk can. I also took the corners off, as you can see here, and that was really only to make sure I didn't whack myself. Well, if I did, it wasn't going to be too painful. But obviously the best idea is just keep your hands well out of the way, which I managed to do, which was quite good. This view shows the chuck foot being turned here. I didn't apply any finish because I thought in the end I would just coat the whole thing with something. Wasn't quite sure at the time, maybe lemon oil. Hadn't decided. And you can see I've just started to form the shape here of what eventually was going to be the neck of the vase and the edge. You obviously can't turn any further than that. Might be able to go a little more, but not much. This shows the vase is now reversed on the chuck, holding on the chuck here, and I've turned the other side to match. You can see I've drawn a line down the middle here, just to give me an idea where the centre was going to be for the next stage. And you can see I've just started to mark out where I was going to bore into the side of the vase on the side. That's obviously, I think I was being a bit minimalistic because it was clear the hole was going to be bigger than that eventually, as you can see in the next shot. So I've now bored through the side, and you can also see that I've used just a file and sandpaper just to give some shape to this side of the thing, just to give me an idea when I'm boring the inside out, the thickness. So that's not fully finished, but it just gave me a good idea, because obviously you don't want to come out the side. This is the bit I've got to avoid anyway. The other thing I did, I marked out the top of the vase with a Sharpie, which was a big mistake, because later on I struggled to get rid of the ink, which had penetrated into the wood a bit too much. So just for anybody who's going to try this, don't use one of those. Okay, this is another view, and you can see on this I've actually sanded around this a bit more. I've made this a little bit more shape and started to shape the top as well and around the neck. Again, just to give me an idea of where I was going on the inside, really, more than anything. I did have a problem with working out how far I was going backwards, because clearly I didn't want to come out the back either. So in the end, I could only do it by measuring the overall thickness and taking away the distance from this face to the inside face, so that I could have some idea of what the thickness was. It didn't need to be too thin, so I wasn't too worried, and I just made it so it was reasonable, shall we say, but I didn't make it too thin, probably about this sort of thickness, the other side as well. And also it was thicker on on this diameter, because I didn't want to get too close to the flat that was on the bottom. And that was the other problem I had, was determining that diameter on the inside, which is where my bit of bent wire that I showed you earlier came in, because I was able to just put that on through the hole and just lean it onto the surface. And when the bend met this diameter, I knew I was about within 5/16 of the flat. And then I stopped turning in the inside, shall we say. On this view, you can see that I've started to shape the top, and also I think I've done a little bit more on the shape the top here, and I've done a little bit more shaping on the sides as well. You can see this is beginning to look a lot more rounded than it was in the earlier views, and a lot more around there as well, just trying to make it all look a little vase-like, shall we say. at this stage, I transferred the chuck to, I've got a carver's vise, which has got a bar which takes the chuck, is the same thread, so you can just screw the chuck onto it, which is quite useful. I think I could have done it on the lathe, but it's certainly easier this way. I've just drilled a series of holes through this and then opened it up using the files and various things, and anything that would work really, carving tools, knife, just to make the top surface. And I think in these other views I've just started to refine it a bit more. And you can see on this top edge, this Sharpie pen was really getting quite annoying, to be honest. I was taking more and more wood off and not getting rid of it. I eventually got there, because you can see it's pretty reasonable by the time I got to that one. These are just a few of the tools that I used, because people sometimes say, what tools did you use? So just a couple of carving tools, this microplane and a knife, and a lot of sandpaper probably. This view, I've turned a register now on the face, and what I've done, I've found the piece of wood that I cut off earlier from this block of wood. I tried to find a bit on there that had got a very similar looking grain to this, so that when I glued it in, it would look relatively all one piece, shall we say. But I thought originally, shall I use a different wood? And then I thought, shall I colour it? Because I was just thinking of the grain not matching up too well. But in the end, I just decided to bite the bullet and make it out the same wood and hope it worked. And I put the lines on just to confuse the eye a bit, maybe. The idea was that this diameter here actually sits very snug inside that diameter there, so that this is pretty much flush with the vase. That was the plan. I've then reversed the vase onto a jam chuck, and so that I could turn the foot off. And you can see that's the foot before I machined it off, and when I pretty much finished. I think after I took this photograph, I did do a bit more blending on that face, because the idea was that that was all going to blend rather nicely, and it doesn't look too good in that photo. And this is just the tool that I used to take the rest of the foot off, and you can see that was just after it was sanded. And that's the finished item. So the insert glued in, and you can see from that view, I think it's fairly flush. And I think when I looked at it when it was finished, or kind of as finished as it was, I think that this edge here could have done with being sort of filed down, sanded down a bit more, to make it a little more curved. And also I think the lip could have been thinner. And I might one day get around to doing that, but I haven't as yet. Okay, now we get to the interesting bit, because are there any questions?
Please feel free to unmute yourselves to ask any questions.
That was lovely, Peter. Have you thought of making a similar a shape on the other side, so that it's symmetrical on the two sides? In other words, turn some rings on the other side.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I didn't at the time. I just thought I would sort of bore a hole through and then fill it up with something. I had wondered whether I could have done it so that it was completely flush and you wouldn't hardly have known that there was a thing in there, really. I think a week or so back on another Middlesex meeting, on the same time that Giancarlo showed us his one, somebody else had made one, and they'd done that. They'd actually put one either side to even it up. So you could certainly do it. Yeah.
I made one.
You made one. Did you show us it at the Middlesex meeting?
I probably did.
Yeah.
Oops. That one.
Peter, what did you use to actually hollow out the inside?
I made it in 2 parts and glued it together.
Yeah.
I'm rather hoping to get Brian to run that demo at the next Middlesex meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my original intention, to do 2 parts. Basically, I was going to do 2 bowls, and I couldn't figure out how to do the neck. So it worked out very differently. But that was very good, Peter, and I'm impressed with that. I'm looking forward to seeing Brian's effort at the next week. I think my problem is, or not problem, but I don't do a great deal of hollowing, and I haven't really got a hollowing tool to go in to the side of the vessel as you've done. So the only way I could do it was basically to sort of make a bowl and then make a replica bowl and go in, sort of hollow out while it's on the outside and then turn them round. Very good. I think you've done a very good job there, and I'm pleased that at least a couple of people have taken up the challenge that I issued anyway.
Yes.
Well done.
Well, it gave me something to think about. I'd honestly never thought of making a flat vase. I mean, seeing you holding that vase up at the time, I thought that really does look an interesting sort of idea. And the idea of doing 2 bowls and gluing it together is obviously an alternative way, isn't it?
Well, it is. But the thing is that you don't have the neck unless you do some. You turn it off centre and leave the neck as you've done.
Yeah.
But I must be. I haven't got the carving tools and that sort of thing. I'm just a turner, as it were.
Yeah. Well, I started as a carver, so I came from the opposite direction. But that one you just showed us, Brian, how did you do the neck of that?
Well, I didn't turn it the way you did.
No.
I actually made a fixture to turn the other way. So I'm rotating the vase that way.
Oh, right.
Right.
Okay.
And that way you can get a better shape down here, and it tapers off. Can't quite get it to the same thickness there in this part because you're actually getting nearer the centre on the turning fixture.
Yeah.
It was quite a horrific turning fixture.
Yeah, I can imagine, actually.
And to do the inside here, I actually turned that on the turning fixture, and I got to a situation where I turned away more of the turning fixture than I really wanted to. But I had to stop doing that.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem was getting the 2 halves to match when I glued them together.
Yeah.
Brian, are you going to be able to take us through this next week?
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, the advantage of the way that I did it was that it's relatively, in comparison, easy. But as Derek was just saying, you do need some carving tools or something at least to put some shape to the vase itself, which is a bit of a downer. I was quite pleased with my little bung in the end because the grain matched quite well.
Yeah, very good.
So it was, it did very well.
And it was ash, was it, Peter?
Yeah, that was just ash. Yeah.
Peter, what tool did you actually use to hollow?
I just went in with a bowl gouge or something to just clean the hole out in the first place, and then I have actually got one of these Ashley Isles bent turning tools for doing sort of boring through a hole sort of thing in an ordinary. It's like a scraper tip on it. It's quite. I meant to bring one in actually. I meant to bring it in and forgot, which is fairly typical. But yes, and because I got two Ashley Isles tools. One was the one with the usual tip on it, which is quite narrow, where you can just turn under on in an internal shoulder, and then I've got a scraper, which is sort of a bowl scraper, and I took the bowl scraper end off and put it onto the other thing, which was, as long as you were careful putting it through the hole, was okay. And then sort of dragging it quite a lot. Otherwise, it tended to catch a bit too much. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
and I'm sure there are some better tools that you can get. I know one or two people who've got some better tools.
Gordon,
Peter, I think.
Yeah.
I think if you'd used a figure of 8 calipers, I think you'd have found it easier in doing the hollowing.
Yeah, what to measure the diameter,
measure the width of the.
Yeah. Well, to measure how much you need to take out or not take out.
Yeah, I did try. I've got figure of 8 calipers, and I've got 1 or 2 other calipers. But wherever I tried, I couldn't kind of get it in the hole and really measure it everywhere. I could measure it maybe in one spot. I couldn't measure it on the back and front face, and I couldn't measure it very well on the outside diameter, which is why I ended up with my bit of bent copper, which worked fine. You know, it was just a very cheap way of making a tool that just measured the diameter. So I knew when I got that piece of down to the lip on the actual thing that it was the right diameter. It's always
that's a variation on the. That's a variation on a theme of a flat vase.
Yeah.
Here is one that I did in one piece of wood.
Yeah.
That's with one piece of wood. Gosh.
Yeah, one piece of wood. And then there's a glass vase that comes out of the middle.
Gosh. Right.
And if you want the origin of this style of work, you need to look back well, at least to 1990 when I made this one, to what Jim Partridge was doing at the time, and he was usually taking a blowtorch to everything. I did take a blowtorch to one of them, and I believe that I sold that one. This one I did indeed sell to my late wife's mother, and it's sweet chestnut and limed.
Yeah,
very nice.
Very nice, yeah. Gosh.
So how was, you know, because it looks an odd shape to be able to turn on a lathe. So have you done it more or less same as I've done it front and back?
Yeah, the front and back. I think I probably would do it slightly differently now, but because in fact I can find a couple of screw holes in one face, and then once you've done both sides, then the problem is how to do the hole in the middle. And so I then put it onto a screw chuck, because, as I say, back in those days I don't think that my chucking system back in 1990 was probably quite up to what they are now. And then I just drilled down a hole in order to put the glass vase in.
Yeah.
Because I find that if you've got a glass vase inside, a glass tube or glass inside, people are more inclined to want to buy it because they can at least put fresh flowers in if they want to.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the difference with that is it's internally it's solid wood except for the hole where the glass is, isn't it?
Yes.
Indeed it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas yours is much more like a pilgrim flask.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah.
That's good. Any more questions for Peter, or are we set to go on? All right.
Nice piece of work, Peter.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Peter. That was great.